That former astronaut and cabinet minister Marc Garneau has died at the age of 76. Now, Garneau, as we know, was the first Canadian to go to space, later becoming president of the Canadian Space Agency. In 2008, he entered politics, representing the Quebec riding of Westmount Ville-Marie, before he served as Minister of Transport and Minister of Foreign Affairs. He retired back in 2023. Joining us this morning is Dr. Shawna Pandya, who is the first Canadian female commercial astronaut. Good morning, Dr. Pandya.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, so many Canadians recognize Marc Garneau as the first Canadian to go to space, and he really helped to lay the groundwork for much of what our Canadian space travel looks like now. What did Marc Garneau mean to you?
Marc Garneau was an inspiration. He was an exemplary Canadian. He's someone who really set the standard of what it meant to be an explorer in the Canadian space sector. Through his accomplishments, leading by example, he really set this incredible standard of excellence that every one of us who is following in his footsteps, knows that we have big shoes to fill.
You know, we were speaking with Marc Garneau just in October. He was here talking about his book. And, you know, when we were listing off all of his accomplishments, he was proud of them, but he took them all in stride. Are there any special memories of him that stand out to you?
You know, I have these two special memories that really stand out to me. So first, when I was a medical student, very early on in my career, I was at a Canadian Space Summit, and he was one of the keynote speakers. He was an MP at that time. And, you know, when you're so early in your career, it means a lot to be able to ask someone of such standing a question. And so I asked him what it meant to be part of the Canadian space sector. And, you know, he was just so proud to be doing this within the Canadian diaspora. And he was, you know, just so proud of how much we've gotten out of the Canadian space program. To this day, I still quote him when he says, "You'll never get more bang out of your buck than you do through the Canadian Space Agency." So that was my first memory of him. And then I had this full circle moment when I spoke with him this past fall, and he was one of the keynote speakers at another Canadian national conference. And this was the first time I had met him since my own spaceflight assignment had been announced. And it was this full circle moment that someone I'd looked up to, had always been an example, who'd always been encouraging, and now I got to meet him face to face and converse now that I had my own spaceflight assignment. So it was incredibly special, and he was just always incredibly encouraging.
And what did he share with you when you got to tell him, like, you know, not only have I completed, but now I've had my assignment as well?
You know, in true Marc Garneau fashion, he was very delighted. He was really encouraging. He was just, you know, excited. He's very excited about space. He's always been about doing this for Canada, doing so in the name of service, doing so in the name of exploration, and doing so with grace and with humility.
With his passing, what has Canada lost?
You know, when I heard the news yesterday, I was shocked and saddened because this is leaving a large void. Those of us who followed his career within military service, within the Canadian Space Agency, within public service, as a member of Parliament, as a minister, we have some very big shoes to fill. And so the way I interpret his passing is, let this be a light within Canadian space exploration and Canadian public service for those of us to follow his standard that he set, and to seek to honor his memory by doing the best we can for Canada, for exploration, and for service.
You know, whether it was in his military service, his career in space, or as a politician, you know, he was always known as somebody who he seemed to land on top of whatever he tried, but he always remained so approachable. When we take a look at his contributions to space, what is he going to be remembered for most?
You know, I think just knowing that he was the very first. He was the first Canadian astronaut in space. He was selected in 1983, before I was even born. He flew in '84, and he recently just celebrated the 40th anniversary of his spaceflight this past October. And you know, I think that really just set the standard. You know, you have someone who's incredibly accomplished with a PhD in electrical engineering, who's been part of the Canadian Air Force, served as a naval officer, and then serves as an astronaut. Like, you really are setting the standard of both accomplishment of being a good team member, but also of going boldly in this high-risk environment. And so I think, Canadians in Canada would do well to remember that, to honor that, and just be really, really proud of who the first Canadian in space was.
Yeah, he really was one of the good ones, best at his craft, but always remained so lighthearted about it all. Dr. Shawna Pandya, great to remember Marc Garneau with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.